The emergency broadcast started at 0347 Galactic Standard Time. It wasn't like the usual trade announcements or diplomatic messages that flooded the communication networks. This signal carried something different, pure desperation. This is the Cathara Oceanic Council broadcasting on all frequencies. Our world is dying. Please, anyone who receives this message, we need immediate evacuation assistance. Our people are running out of time. The voice belonged to Elder Siphon, the elected leader of a species that had lived peacefully in their ocean world for over 3,000 years. Her words trembled as she described what was happening to their planet. Massive volcanic eruptions beneath their seas were turning their crystal-clear waters into acid. The delicate coral cities where 40 million Cathara lived were dissolving. Their food chains were collapsing. Marine life was dying by the billions. We have perhaps 4 months before our oceans become completely uninhabitable. We are a peaceful people with no military fleet. We cannot evacuate ourselves. Please, we beg the galaxy for help. The message reached the Vorthok Empire first. These warrior merchants controlled the largest military fleet in the galaxy. In their crystal towers on Vorthok Prime, the council met for exactly 12 minutes. Defense Minister Krekstar pulled up the economic analysis. The Cathara homeworld had no rare minerals, no strategic location, and no valuable resources. Their aquatic nature meant expensive specialized equipment would be needed for any rescue operation. The cost-benefit ratio was terrible. Motion denied, Krekstar announced. We have better uses for our ships. The Zephyrian Consortium received the signal 3 hours later. These master traders had grown rich by connecting different worlds through commerce. Their response took even less time. The Cathara produced nothing the galaxy wanted to buy. They had no manufacturing capabilities, no technological innovations worth acquiring, and no trade relationships that would make their rescue profitable. Not our problem, declared Trade Director Valenex. Business is business. The ethereal collective, those ancient beings who claimed to be the galaxy's spiritual guides, simply archived the message without comment. They had evolved beyond physical concerns, they said. Material suffering was just another lesson for younger species to learn by the end of the first day. 17 different civilizations had received the Cathora's plea for help. 17 civilizations had access to the ship's technology and resources needed for a massive evacuation operation. 17 civilizations said no. The galaxy had grown cold and calculating. Each species looked after their own interests first. Compassion was seen as weakness. Helping strangers was considered foolish. But there was one species that hadn't heard the message yet. They were new to the galactic community, barely 50 years since first contact. Most aliens considered them primitive and emotional. They called themselves humans. The Galactic Council chamber fell silent when Ambassador Jiho stood up. He was young for a diplomat, maybe 35, with tired eyes that had seen too many political games in his 3 years representing Earth. The massive circular hall could hold representatives from 200 species. But today only the major powers were present. The chair recognizes the human delegation, announced the council's AI moderator in its emotionless voice. Jiho cleared his throat. Around him, alien delegates shifted in their specialized seats. The Vorthok warriors, in their battle armor, the Zephyrian traders with their multiple arms already calculating profits, the ghostly ethereals floating in their energy containment fields. All of them had just voted against helping the Cathara. Thank you, Jiho said, his voice carrying across the chamber. I've been listening to this debate for 2 hours. I've heard every reason why we can't help the Cathara. Too expensive, too difficult, not profitable, not our responsibility. He paused, looking around the room. Some delegates weren't even paying attention anymore, busy with their personal communicators. Well, Earth volunteers to lead the rescue operation. The reaction was immediate. Laughter echoed from several sections. The Vorthok delegation found it particularly amusing. Commander Thexmalar, a 7-foot-tall warrior with razor-sharp teeth, stood up without permission. "You, the babies of the galaxy." Thexmalar's voice boomed with amusement. "Humans have been in space for what, 50 of your tiny years? You barely have a dozen ships capable of interstellar travel." More laughter rippled through the chamber. The Zephyrian Trade Minister Calvert joined in. "Your entire space fleet couldn't evacuate a single Cathara city, let alone 40 million beings. This is not a job for amateurs." Jiho remained standing, his face calm despite the insults. He had expected this reaction. Earth was indeed the newest member of the galactic community. Their technology was primitive compared to civilizations that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. "You're right," Jiho admitted. "We don't have enough ships. Our technology is basic. We've never attempted anything like this before." The laughter grew louder. Someone in the ethereal section made a comment about emotional species that their translator rendered as something like foolish children. But Jiho wasn't finished. He raised his voice over the mockery. "But we're going to try anyway, because 40 million people are about to die, and apparently we're the only ones who think that matters." The chamber went quiet again. This time, the silence felt different, heavy, uncomfortable. Vexmalar sneered. "Your emotional weakness will be the death of your species, human. The galaxy doesn't run on feelings." Jiho looked straight at the Vorthok commander. Maybe it should. The news hit Earth like a thunderbolt. Within 6 hours of Ambassador Jiho's declaration at the Galactic Council, emergency broadcasts interrupted every television program, radio show, and internet stream on the planet. President Sora stood behind the podium in the White House briefing room, her usually perfect hair slightly messy from the emergency meetings that had been running since dawn. The world's leaders had been on video calls for hours, and for once, nobody was arguing about trade deals or border disputes. "My fellow humans," she began, her voice steady, despite the enormous task ahead. 40 million intelligent beings are about to die. The galaxy has turned its back on them, but we won't. She announced the immediate implementation of Operation Deep Rescue. Every space-capable vessel humanity owned would be converted for the mission. Military ships, cargo haulers, research vessels, even the luxury cruise liners that took wealthy tourists to Mars, everything was now part of the rescue fleet at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Captain Minho was already elbowed deep in blueprints. He'd been awake for 18 straight hours, surviving on coffee and determination. Around him, engineers from 12 different countries worked alongside alien technology specialists, the few who understood Cathara biology. "We need to turn cargo holds into swimming pools," Minho explained to his exhausted team. "But not just any pools. These have to maintain the exact chemical balance that keeps Cathara alive." The challenge was massive. Humans were air-breathing, land-walking creatures. Their ships were designed for dry, pressurized environments. Now they had to create floating oceans inside metal boxes traveling through the vacuum of space. In Seoul, Dr. Yuna hadn't left her laboratory in 2 days. Her team was working on portable habitat units, essentially life support systems for beings who breathed water instead of air. The first prototypes kept failing. The water turned toxic, the pressure systems exploded, the temperature controls malfunctioned. "Try again," she told her team after the 15th failure. "Those people are counting on us." But the most incredible thing wasn't happening in government buildings or research labs. It was happening in ordinary homes around the world. Families were donating their savings to fund the mission. Retired engineers came out of retirement to help. Students dropped out of school to volunteer. Factory workers took extra shifts to produce components. The internet exploded with support. Social media was flooded with messages for the Cathara. Children drew pictures of the aquatic aliens and hung them in their windows. "We're coming" became the unofficial motto of the entire planet. For the first time in human history, every nation, every culture, every political party was working toward the same goal. Not for profit, not for power, but simply because it was right. The galaxy had called humanity naive and emotional. They were about to learn that sometimes emotions could move mountains. The first human ships dropped out of hyperspace near the Cathera homeworld and immediately knew they were in trouble. The planet that should have been a beautiful blue marble was now a sickly yellow-green color. Toxic clouds swirled in the atmosphere, and even from orbit, they could see massive volcanic eruptions turning the oceans into acid soup. Commander Hoon stared at the viewscreen from the bridge of the rescue ship Harmony. He'd commanded cargo runs to Mars for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for this. The planet looked like it was melting. "Sir, we're getting communication attempts from the surface," reported Communications Officer Dayon. "But the signal keeps breaking up. I think the volcanic activity is interfering with everything." The first evacuation attempt went wrong immediately. The transport ship Mercy descended through the toxic atmosphere, its hull groaning from the chemical reactions with the acidic air. When it reached the Cathara city of Refendra, the crew discovered their first major problem. The Cathara weren't just aquatic, they were completely aquatic. They couldn't survive in air for more than a few minutes. The human evacuation pods, designed for air-breathing beings, were useless. "We need water transport tubes," Engineer Junho frantically radioed back to the command ship. "Long ones, sealed ones, that can move them from their city to our ship without exposing them to air." While they were figuring out the logistics, disaster struck. The transport ship Explorer moved too close to an underwater volcano, trying to reach a stranded group of Cathara families. The acidic water ate through its hull in minutes. All 37 crew members were lost, along with the 200 Cathara they'd been trying to save. 4 hours later, the second ship Endeavor suffered a different fate. Its improvised life support system for the Cathara failed during ascent. The water turned poisonous, and both the rescued aliens and the human crew died before they could fix the problem. Commander Heian received orders from Earth to retreat and reassess. The mission was too dangerous. The technology wasn't ready. They were losing more lives than they were saving. "No," Heian told his communication officer. "Send a message back to Earth. Tell them we're staying." His crew looked at him like he'd lost his mind. They'd already lost 2 ships and dozens of good people. "Sir, we don't even know how to keep them alive in our ships," Chief Medic Kira pointed out. "Then we'll learn," Heian replied simply. "Those people down there are dying by the thousands every day. We're not leaving them." He turned to face his bridge crew. "We're going to figure this out, one step at a time. Even if it takes us 100 tries. The real rescue mission was just beginning." Dr. Nari hadn't slept in 4 days. Her laboratory aboard the rescue ship Harmony looked like a war zone. Broken equipment, scattered notes, and dozens of failed water samples that had killed test organisms within minutes. She was trying to crack a puzzle that had stumped the galaxy's best scientists. How to keep Cathara alive outside their natural ocean environment. The breakthrough came at 3 a.m. during her 47th attempt. She was mixing trace minerals from Earth's oceans with synthetic compounds when something clicked. The test sample turned a perfect shade of blue-green, and the tiny Cathara gill tissue she'd been experimenting with actually started processing oxygen. "I've got it," she shouted, waking up half the ship. "It's not about copying their ocean water. It's about creating something their bodies can adapt to." Meanwhile, 3 decks down, Engineer Seijin was performing miracles with spare parts and desperation. The ship's cargo holds weren't designed to become swimming pools, but that's exactly what he was making them into, using emergency foam, metal plating, and what looked like half the ship's ductwork. He was building massive water tanks that could house thousands of Cathara safely. "This shouldn't work," muttered his assistant Wari, watching Seijin weld together. what used to be a fuel storage container and a water recycling system. Good thing the Cathara don't know that, Seojin grinned, sparks flying from his welding torch. The first successful evacuation, using the new systems, saved 800 Kithara from the collapsing city of Tidehome. The aliens swam gratefully into Seojin's improvised tanks while breathing Dr. Nara's synthetic atmosphere mixture. For the first time since arriving, human crews cheered instead of mourning. Word of the breakthrough spread quickly. Within hours, every human ship in the system was implementing the new designs. The evacuation rate jumped from hundreds per day to thousands per hour, but the most surprising development came from space itself. Alien observation ships had been quietly watching the human rescue efforts from a safe distance. The Vorthok had positioned 3 vessels nearby, officially, to monitor the situation. The Zephyrians had 2 trade ships lurking at the system's edge, claiming they were protecting trade routes. Now, as human ships successfully evacuated entire Kithara cities, using improvised technology and pure determination, the alien observers were sending urgent reports back to their homeworlds. How are they doing this? Transmitted Captain Velmox of the Zephyrian observation vessel, Prophet's Edge. Our best engineers said it was impossible. The answer was simple, though the galaxy couldn't understand it yet. Humans didn't accept impossible as an answer when lives were at stake. They just kept trying until they found a way. The rescue operation was finally gaining momentum. Captain Beam's final transmission came at 14:32 Galactic time. His ship, the Courage, was attempting to evacuate the underwater city of Deep Current when the seafloor beneath them exploded. This is Beam to all ships. We've got a massive volcanic eruption directly below us. The water is turning to steam. We can't pull out in time. His voice remained steady, even as alarms blared in the background. Tell my wife I love her. Tell Earth we saved 3,000 Kithara today. The Courage vanished in a column of superheated water and ash. 200 human crew members died instantly, along with Captain Beam. It was the single largest loss of life in the rescue operation. But it wouldn't be the last. Back on Earth, the economic reality of the mission was hitting hard. Admiral Yu sat in her Pentagon office, reviewing reports that painted a grim picture. The rescue operation was consuming resources faster than anyone had predicted. Steel production was down 60% because every available ton was going to ship modifications. Food prices had risen 30% as supply ships were diverted to the Kithara system. Power grids across 3 continents were straining because factories were working around the clock to produce evacuation equipment. Ma'am, we've got shortages of everything, reported her aide, Colonel Taiyang. Medical supplies, fuel, rare earth metals for electronics. The president's economic advisors are saying we might face a recession if this continues. But the most surprising news came from public opinion polls. Despite the hardships, despite the rising costs, despite the tragic losses like Captain Beam's crew, human support for the mission had actually increased. In Chicago, factory workers were volunteering for double shifts without overtime pay. In Mumbai, families were rationing electricity so more power could go to rescue ship production. In Snow Paulo, students were organizing fundraisers to help pay for fuel costs. We're not just saving aliens, explained Grandmother Hown at a protest, supporting the mission. We're saving people. Just because they live underwater doesn't make them different from us. News interviews showed the same sentiment everywhere. A farmer in Kansas said the Kithara children reminded him of his own grandchildren. A teacher in Tokyo had her students writing letters to encourage the rescue crews. A mechanic in Lagos was working for free to repair ships returning from the mission. The galaxy watched in amazement. These humans were bankrupting themselves and sacrificing their own lives for creatures they'd never met, from a world they'd never seen. The alien observer still couldn't understand why, but they were beginning to realize that humanity's weakness might actually be their greatest strength. The change started quietly, almost secretly. Zephyrian merchant Veltar had been watching the human rescue operation for 3 weeks from his trade ship positioned at the edge of the Cathara system. What he saw challenged everything he believed about business and profit. Veltar had built his fortune by calculating every transaction down to the last credit. Nothing happened without a clear financial benefit. But these humans were doing something that made no economic sense, and they were succeeding where his civilization's best minds had failed. On day 22 of the rescue operation, Veltar made a decision that would have shocked his business partners. He sent a coded message to Admiral Yunbi's flagship. "This is Zephyrian vessel, Prophet's Edge. We have medical supplies, food rations, and water purification equipment. Consider it a business investment in future relations." Yunbi stared at the message in disbelief. The Zephyrians had voted against helping the Cathara, but now they were offering exactly what the human fleet desperately needed. "Accept it," she told her communications officer, "and send them our thanks." 2 days later, something even more surprising happened. General Morden of the Vorthok military contacted the human command directly. The same warrior who had laughed at their emotional weakness now had a different tone. "Human ships," his deep voice rumbled over the communication channel. "Your vessels are vulnerable to pirate attacks while carrying refugees. My battlecruiser Ironheart will provide escort service for your convoy routes." When asked why, Morden was silent for a long moment. "I have seen your Captain Beam's final transmission. A warrior's death in service to others deserves respect, even from enemies." But the biggest surprise came from the mysterious ethereal collective. These ancient beings rarely communicated with younger species, considering themselves above physical concerns. Yet they transmitted detailed star charts, showing previously unknown worlds with suitable oceans for Cathara resettlement. The data came with a simple message: life deserves to continue. Commander Hoon couldn't believe what was happening. Species that had refused to help were now quietly providing aid. They claimed it was for political reasons, or business opportunities, or strategic advantages. But everyone knew the truth. Humanity's determination had shamed them into action. The rescue fleet wasn't alone anymore. Zephyrian supply ships brought desperately needed equipment. Vorthok warships protected the refugee convoys. Ethereal navigation data guided them to safe harbor worlds. The galaxy was learning something new from these primitive humans. Sometimes doing the right thing was more powerful than doing the profitable thing. The tide of the rescue operation was finally turning in their favor. Captain Temin stood on the bridge of the rescue ship Unity, watching the final evacuation transport rise from the dying planet below. The ship Hope carried the last 3,000 Cathara survivors from the remote polar settlements that had taken weeks to reach. As it cleared the toxic atmosphere, Temin felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he'd been carrying for 3 months. "That's it, sir," reported his navigator Sujin, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "All evacuation zones report complete. We got them all out." Not quite all, Temin thought grimly. The official count showed 39.7 million Cathara, saved from a total population of 40 million. 300,000 beings had been lost, some to the volcanic disasters, others trapped in collapsed cities they couldn't reach in time, and many more who had died in the early evacuation attempts before the humans figured out how to keep them alive. Those numbers would haunt him forever. But right now, he focused on the incredible truth. They had achieved the impossible. Below them, the Cathara homeworld was dying its final death. The massive volcanic eruptions had reached a tipping point. The planet's oceans were literally boiling away into space, creating vast clouds of steam that stretched into orbit. Ancient coral cities that had stood for millennia crumbled into the acidic depths. It looked like the surface of hell. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the refugee convoy," Communications Officer Heian announced. The Kythera Elder Council wants to send a message to Earth. Elder Siphone's image appeared on the main screen. The elderly Kythera looked exhausted, but her large eyes held something that hadn't been there 3 months ago. Hope. People of Earth, she began, her translated words carrying deep emotion. We have no way to repay what you have done. You saved our entire civilization when the galaxy abandoned us. Your children will grow up knowing they are descended from heroes. Around the galaxy, alien observation fleets watched in stunned silence. The rescue operation that every advanced civilization had declared impossible was complete. These primitive humans had evacuated an entire species, using jury-rigged equipment and pure determination. On the Vorthok observation ship, Commander Thex Malar, the same warrior who had mocked humanity's emotional weakness, stared at his tactical displays in amazement. How many ships did they lose? He asked his tactical officer. 43 vessels, sir. Over 800 casualties. The greatest rescue operation in galactic history was finally over. The last Kythera transport disappeared into hyperspace, carrying its precious cargo to new ocean worlds where they could rebuild their civilization. Behind them, their homeworld died alone. 6 months after the last Kythera transport ship escaped, their dying homeworld ambassador Ari stood before a very different galactic council. The same chamber that had once echoed with laughter at humanity's naive rescue proposal now buzzed with serious debate about a revolutionary new law. The human doctrine was simple in concept, but massive in scope. Any galactic civilization with the resources to help a species facing extinction would be legally required to provide aid. Refusing would result in trade sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and exclusion from council decisions. The motion is unprecedented, declared Council Speaker Zixandra, a floating crystalline being from the neutral zone. Never before has the Council mandated humanitarian intervention. Around the chamber, the same alien delegates who had mocked Earth's rescue mission now found themselves in an uncomfortable position. Public opinion across the galaxy had shifted dramatically. Citizens of multiple species were demanding their governments support the new doctrine. Ari looked out at the assembled representatives, her heart steady despite the importance of this moment. At 38, she was still young for a galactic ambassador, but the Kythera rescue had given her a voice that commanded respect. Honored delegates, she began, her words transmitted instantly across the galaxy. 6 months ago, you laughed when humanity volunteered to save the Kythera. You called us emotional, naive, technologically inferior. She paused, letting that sink in. You were right about our technology. Our ships were basic. Our equipment failed constantly. We lost hundreds of brave people in that rescue operation. Her voice grew stronger. But we saved 39.7 million lives. The chamber remained silent. Even the usually restless Sifarian traders sat still. Today, the Kythera are thriving in their new homes. Their children attend schools in beautiful coral cities. Their artists create music that brings tears to human eyes. Their scientists are already contributing to galactic research projects. She gestured to the viewing screen, which showed images of healthy Kythera communities in their new ocean worlds. This happened because one species decided that preventing genocide was more important than profit margins, more important than political calculations, more important than convenience. Ambassador Ari's final words would be quoted in history books for centuries. Honored Council, we've spent millennia measuring civilization by the size of our fleets, the power of our weapons, the reach of our empires. But real civilization isn't measured by what you can destroy or conquer. It's measured by who you choose to save when no one is watching. The human doctrine passed by unanimous vote. The galaxy would never be the same.